Hello everyone, this is Paul the Oakenite coming back with another game about yet another revolution. Occurring right alongside the Irish War of Independence and the Irish Civil War, we have very similar events unfolding in Soviet Dawn, the Russian Civil War 1918 to 1921, published by Worthington Publishing and designed by Darren Levioff. Soviet Dawn covers events in Russia beginning not long after the collapse of Imperial Russia and carries through to the defeat of all the various counter-revolutionaries that rose to counter the nascent Soviet Union. Soviet Dawn is one of many purpose-designed solitaire games built around the States of Siege system, which features a central point with multiple paths leading to it. States of Siege has power titles ranging from the Siege of Malta to the Dawn of the Zeds. It is a proven framework that has been successfully applied to many games at different eras. Components. The version currently sold by Worthington is the Deluxe Edition, and deluxe it is. The box is sturdy, has evocative art, including a back-printed front cover. Also included, a component tray that holds all the counters and the cards included in the game. The Deluxe Edition also includes 12 extra cards that can be added to the base game to increase variability and, to some degree, game difficulty. Complexity is given as 3 out of 10, which is about right, and a solitaire rating of 10, as it is strictly a solitaire game. Gameplay will go about an hour for an experienced player, or shorter if the game ends early. The hard-mounted 22x17 map is ample-sized and really nice. The counters are large, chunky, clearly printed, and likewise suitably deluxe. There are no player aid cards, however most supporting information and game status is printed right on the game board. The game is driven by a single card pull each turn. The linen cards affect a list of fronts that, if active, will move, events affecting gameplay, special advantages or encumbrances imposed upon the player, and the number of action points that the player can use that turn. A few cards will also trigger a political dissent phase that only occurs when one of 3 cards is pulled. Cards are divided into 3 epochs, representing the Twilight, Darkness, and eventual Soviet Dawn. Play begins in the twilight of Imperial Russia, where Russia begins at war with Germany and the Tsar is alive but in captivity. Succeeding epochs occur by card event and are shuffled into the deck of cards that have yet to be drawn. Consequently, the tempo at which the draw deck is expanded depends entirely on the luck of the draw. The 24-page rulebook contains approximately 9 pages of rules, plus 4 pages explaining each and every card in the game. The card explanations are important and should be considered as part of the rules. However, you don't need to read them prior to starting play. Simply look up the cards as they enter the game, and you are good. The remaining pages include a few optional rules, a comprehensive example of play, and several pages of historic background. The rules are generally well written, although could have been improved for clarity in a few cases. In addition, they trip over not one, but 2 of my pet peeves. First, there is no index. With 13 to 14 pages of rules, that should be considered mandatory in the modern era of word processors. Second, there is no table of contents. You gotta be kidding me. That lovely rendition of Lenin on the cover should have been a table of contents. No excuses here. Gameplay. In Soviet Dawn, there are several paths converging on Moscow, each of which represents a military front. Each front has a marker, either a standee or a flat marker, your choice, representing the farthest advanced of your enemy. Enemies include the Germans, the Finns, the Western Allies, the Poles, the Eastern Whites, and the Southern Whites. Should any front enter Moscow, the game ends in a military defeat for the revolution or a possible draw if you almost make it to the end. Fronts may be inactive, meaning they do not advance and are of no threat. Active, whereby they have a chance of advancing each turn, and removed, meaning that particular front has been defeated and its protagonists are no longer in the game. The sequence of play is simple. First, headline phase. Reveal the top card of the draw deck. Second, move opposing fronts. Advance or retreat as indicated by the card. Third, Soviet action phase. Perform the number of actions indicated by the card. Actions are, first, attempt to push back a chosen front by rolling a d6 against the selected front's strength. If successful, the front is pushed back one area on their track. Second, attempt to advance your standing on the political track by rolling a d6 higher than the resistance value printed on the track. Third, Red Army reorganization. Roll a d6, which may be modified by the current event card. If a modified 6 is rolled, roll again to obtain a long-term advantage for the Red Army. Fourth and final phase, political descent phase. Roll as indicated on the active card for possibly advancing or diminishing Bolshevik political influence. This phase is only played when directed by the card that was drawn earlier in the turn. Victory. Victory may be achieved in either of two ways. First, military victory. A military victory is achieved by surviving until the draw deck is empty and is lost by a front advancing into Moscow. Second, political victory. A political victory is achieved by advancing on the political track to a 9. A loss occurs if the political strength falls below a 1. At the start, the political track is set at 1. At this point, I'd like to show you how to play Soviet Dawn by clicking off a few turns. And so all this explanation I did earlier will kind of congeal together into something that makes sense. As far as the board setup, we have the southern white armies down here, the White Russians. We have the Poles, who are inactive. We have the German army. Russia is still in World War I, and so the Germans are still there, knocking at the door. We have the Western allies, US and Britain, who can eventually start pressuring the Russians by the north, the Red Russians from the north. And the Eastern White Russians. And we have the Tsar in captivity. We have the war status, which shows us still in the war. We have the Red Army upgrades that I had mentioned. These counters, I don't think I mentioned, these are basically free actions that you can use as kind of an emergency reserve if you need them. The top ones are for military actions. The bottom ones are for political. Once you use them, they're used up for the game, and they do provide a few victory points if you don't use them, so you may want to not use them if you don't need to. And like I say, down here is the political track. It starts at 1, which means we're only 1 away from losing the game, so it would be kind of nice to pump that up a little bit, which is what that number is. So when we roll bigger than a 3 on a 6-sided dice, if we're taking an action to go ahead and do a political action, 4, 5, or 6 when it's in the slowest part of the chart would be successful, moving the counter up. Likewise, the numbers on the fronts are the die roll above which you need to roll to push that backwards farther away from Moscow. All right, I think that's about all we need to do. Let's go ahead and pull the card. The first phase is the draw card and handle event. So let's draw the card and handle the event. Czech Legion revolts. Okay. What that does is, over here, there's the Czech Legion, which is, I guess, a bunch of Czechoslovakians that were trapped behind the lines. And so they are now active. And while they are active, there's a -1 die roll modifier towards Eastern offensive. So Russia's attempts to push back the Eastern White Russians will be at a detriment. Oh boy. In addition, if we look on the card to the left, we see that the Finnish front advances. Well, it's inactive, so it doesn't. The Polish front advances. Well, it's inactive, so it doesn't. And the Eastern front advances. The important thing about the Eastern Front is that's going to determine the fate of the Tsar. There's a card in this Twilight deck that will resolve what happens to the Tsar. If the Eastern counter is in zone 4 or 5, the Tsar and his family are killed, as they were historically. But if they're in zones 1, 2, or 3, they're rescued. So that doesn't sound good. So let's go ahead and we have to pay attention to the Eastern Front. In addition, we get 4 actions. So what are we going to do? 4 actions. Well, let's go ahead and even though it's at a detriment, try to push that eastern front back. So it's a 3. It's at one detriment, so that makes it a 4. So we got to roll a 5 or a 6. We got to go roll bigger than this number on the counter, and it's been modified 1 to our detriment. All right, let's try it. It's 1, a 4. Huh, too bad. 2, a 1. Oh, too bad. Well, this isn't working. This isn't working at all. We got to do this. We got to do some political. So we need at least a 4 here, a 2. Let's see, a 4 or 5, excuse me. All right. So we get 1 political point. And out of 4 actions, we only had 1 success, which is kind of a bummer. We do have these guys we could use, those guys we could use, but after 1 card, I think that's kind of early to do that. We were not directed to resolve any political dissent, so this card draw is done. The Hungry Spring, Kulag's threatened, whatever that is. It gives us 3 actions. It says no offensive in the south this turn, so we can't hit back there. See, in the Baltics, we have the Germans advancing. The Poles are not active, and the east advances. Oh, we're in trouble. Okay, so we're going to advance the Germans. And we're going to advance in the east. Now we have 3 actions plus the reserve actions to do something. I think we got to push back in the east, because right now the Tsar would be rescued, which is not something I really want to see. And we can't do anything in the south, but they didn't do anything there, so we're fine. All right, we're going to do 1 action against these eastern armies again, trying to roll a 5 or 6. 5. All right. So we pushed them back 1 zone. And now let's roll. I could continue there, but let's roll a 5 or 6 against these Germans. This is number 2. No. Number 3. Yes. The Germans get pushed back. And now with the see, that was 3? That was 3. Okay, we're done. We're on to the next card. The Finnish Civil War breaks out. Oh, this sounds great. Finland track activated during the headline phase, which is the first phase. Okay, so now the Finns are active and they can start pushing forward. We get 3 actions and we advance the Germans in the Baltic. So the Finns become active, and the Germans advance in the Baltic. All right. This is wonderful. We get 3 actions. Therefore, 3 actions. All right, let's take a political action. Try to get some more going on here. On the political side, 2. Nope, need a 4. Second action, same thing. It is a 5. So we go up 1 on the political track, so we're not in immediate danger of losing the game. And let's see what we can do against these Germans. We need a 4. Nope. All right, that was 3 actions. We're done. Next draw. The Red Terror. Oh boy. So we only get 1 action. There are no restrictions, and we advance on the Finnish front. So since the Finns activated with the last draw, they now move when instructed to do so. So they are now on their 3 spot, as well as the Germans, with the Eastern Whites on their 4th spot. But we don't want to let them go farther, because we could start having the Tsar survive, which it doesn't sound good. All right. So we only get 1 action. Let's try to kick those Finns back to from whence they came. Kick the Finns back. Nope. Well, I only have reserve actions left. I'm not going to use them just yet. And we pick a card. We got the Latvian Rifleman. All right. Support the Red Cause. So it's +2 die roll modifiers versus Baltic and +1 versus the Southern or Eastern. Well, here's a chance to make some hay. We advance in the East, which is bad, and Poles are not active. All right. So, going to need to do something here. The Eastern whites have advanced. We don't want the Tsar to survive. So, we have a +1 and a -1. We still have the checks. That's subtracting 1 from our die. But we got a plus from our card. So, we're back to normal again. We need to roll 4 more. We have 3 actions. 4 more. Nope. Second one. Yes. 2. Let's do it one more time. 3, and I think we might use some reserve actions because we have all of these nice positives going on for us. 3rd. Yes. All right. So the Eastern White Russians have been pushed back to their starting point, and I am going to burn. I'm going to burn a reserve offensive. That counter is burnt for the game now, but we're going to use it to try to hit these Germans in the Baltic, and we have a +2 modifier. So we need a 3 or better to kick them back. A 6. Most excellent. So we've kicked the Germans back to their starting point. So right now the only guys that aren't at their starting point are these Finns, which we will handle another day. Next card. All right, the Tsar's fate is decided. So basically what this is doing is, because the Eastern White counter is in Zone 5, Zone 4 would be good as well, that triggers the execution of the Tsar. So the Tsar and his family have met their fate. And let's see, we also advance in the Baltic, which I'll just do off camera here. The Allies are not in this yet, Poles not in this yet, but the Southern Front is. So now we've advanced in the south, and the Germans have come up one. So I'm glad we kicked them back last turn. All right, the Tsar is done, and we're on to the next card. Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. We have 2 options here. We can accept the treaty, or we can use the Ukraine option. The first one gives us 2 actions. The second one gives us 1. I think I'm just going to take the historical option of accept the treaty. This is where the darkness cards get added, as you can see. And the Allied track is, oh geez, the Allies are in this now. Isn't that special? But the Germans are out. The Baltic goes out. And so it also says that the Germans retreat. So basically what that means is the Germans go back 1 and then go inactive. They're not out of the game necessarily, but they are definitely inactive. Taking the treaty option, the Finns and the Southern forces advance. So the Finns are now in Zone 2, knocking the door on St. Petersburg, which is a bad thing, and the South advances as well. And this is where we would go ahead and shuffle in the second part of the deck, which would be all this deck here. But for purposes of play demo, we're going to call it right here. So we got through the early part of the deck. We have executed the Tsar. We have pushed back the Germans some. They've come back some. We got guys active all over the place now. So these guys are active and strong. So the Germans are out of it, but the Allies are in it. Lucky us. The Finns are pushing in. We only have the Poles and the Germans inactive right now. But before we finish the turn, we have to upgrade the Great War status to treaty has been signed. So it's no longer, Russia's no longer in the war. And we get to perform two actions, which we push the southern front back, and we also push back the Finns, having burnt a second reserve offensive to do it. All right. That's how this game is played. Of course, there's more wrinkles. We're just kind of getting into the game here, but you can see the cards go pretty fast. The game will go pretty fast. Like I say, about an hour, I would guess, if you are going through it at a fairly good rate. Let's go ahead and move on to my opinion of the game. So what do I think of Red Dawn? One opinion that I read on Board Game Geek said that if you roll way more 5s and 6s than you are entitled to, and you like reading historical snippets on cards, then you will like this game. I think that opinion sells Soviet Dawn short. The designer says that the game is hard to win and may be enjoyed best by looking at it as a sort of alternative history drama or narrative. Yes, the game is challenging, but if you pay attention to how all the events unfold, the story of your Russian Revolution can be enjoyed, win or lose. The game is always pressuring the player. At times the pressure is manageable, but there are times when the cards and the dice will conspire to bring your game to an early end. But the game sets up and plays so quickly that the solution is to set up and do it all over again. The optional rules and optional cards included in the deluxe edition, plus the sheer randomness of normal gameplay, should keep Soviet Dawn fresh for many playthroughs. If I were to criticize, I'd prefer Irish Freedom's approach to providing military and paramilitary units to generic fronts. A bit more detail might have been nice, but that would have no doubt added to the rules, complexity, and gameplay time, so I can see why the design choices were made as they are. On a final note, I think that any attempt to compare Soviet Dawn to Irish Freedom misses the point. Both are good games, well designed, and fun to play. How you relate to one game or the other probably depends more on you and your family history more than anything else. In both these games, the history is as important as the game, and there is room for both in the marketplace. And that, my friends, is about all for today. Thank you for dialing in and supporting my channel. Please leave a comment or thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and absolutely hit the subscribe button if you have not yet subscribed. With that, I wish you all a pleasant evening. Thanks for watching.